I wanted to know whether or not people out there thought that unions are obsolete. In a way, I guess that unions look like something out of the 19th century. If you think about Eugene Debs and the Pullman strike, that was out of the 20th century, but they had this very bad working conditions for the average workers after the Industrial Revolution started up, and they had to organize and fight the large companies in order to have a decent standard of living, whether it be wages or how many hours they work. And really, they didn't even pass laws against child labor, I believe, until 1912. So they would just hire a bunch of little kids to work in these sweatshops, and some of them would come out deformed and so forth, and they pay them a dime a day or something like that. And ridiculous. And it was because it was a tendency at that time of the capitalist system to view the working people as a commodity, and they didn't really view them as human beings. Now, the reason this even came into my mind recently was because some young man that I know who's a freshman in college told me that he has his business classes, and his business professor told him that, well, first of all, she asked everybody in the class, what do you guys think of unions? And everybody in the class raised their hands and had bad things to say about unions. Oh, I was in a union and they took my union dues and didn't do a thing for me and all this kind of stuff. And then she went on to say, as the teacher in her very authoritarian way, that unions in America today and unions in the world today, she says, are obsolete. So, I'm wondering, how self-serving is that? A professor in business school telling his students that unions are obsolete. In other words, if I do say so myself, being a business person, I certainly think they're obsolete, right? That's what she would say. And all the guys nod, yeah, they're obsolete. Well, I'm wondering if what does obsolete mean? See, that's what I'm wondering about. Because it may be true that unions are obsolete in their eyes as a result of the fact that unions may be completely destroyed and defeated as a force, at least in America and probably around most of the world except for Europe. I mean, they were able to, from about 1970 until about the current day, the Chamber of Commerce and the Manufacturers Associations and so forth have contributed money to their educational segment of their lobbies to promote the concept that unions are a bad thing. Unions are obsolete. That's what they've been saying. And you could look this up. They've spent about $1 billion over the years promoting the concept that unions are a bad thing and that they're obsolete. Well, since 1981, they've been very successful. The union used to be about 1 in 4 people were in the union, and I believe the statistics are something like 1 in 15 are now in the unions. The private sector unions especially have taken a terrible decline since 1981. And if you remember, the first thing that Ronald Reagan did when he entered the White House was he fired the air traffic controllers, who were all part of the air traffic controllers union. So the point being that they have actually made unions less and less of a factor in the workplace in America since about 1981. And it seems, this may be a coincidence, but this average working pay for the rank and file workers has declined since 1981 and compared with inflation. So the inflationary adjusted incomes has declined since 1981. As a corresponding time, union participation has declined. That might be a coincidence. Might not. I want to say very briefly that many people who are against the unions act as though unions are some kind of a socialist system that's against the free market capitalist system. But I think you can think about this in a little bit different way if you put your mind to it. What is a free market? That is, that an individual human being can act freely within the society to apply his efforts to obtaining as much money as he possibly can. So that if you're a business owner, you purchase a bunch of the means of, the natural resources and the limited resources, and you make a business to gain a profit. And that way you can stick that money into your pocket. Now, what is a union? A union is a guy who has a job working for somebody and doesn't have any way to make a larger pay. So what he does is he associates with all the other employees of that business, and he puts together a union. And as a collective group, they go to the company and they say, we want more money. And that's the same thing. By my way of thinking, you're an individual. Everybody's in business for themselves in this world. Everybody's trying to make a profit for themselves. Everybody wants to make out as well as they can. And they do the things necessary. The associate, when you put a corporation together, you gather investors and you take their capital and you go to the group of people that you hire, the management, and you organize them in such a way that you're going to make a larger profit for your individual self. As a union member, you go to all these different people and you organize them and you push your agenda to be able to make as larger profits for your individual self. It's the free market. Unions are a natural part of the free market. It was somewhere in the early, right around I guess 1800-ish, somewhere around there, they really started to push the unions. It was an idea that came as a result of the large corporations. It was a response to the large corporations. They had guys tied, the serfs working in the Middle Ages. They eventually, when they had skilled labor, they built guilds in the Middle Ages, and the guilds then were able to do the same thing that the unions did later. It's an old idea, and it's a natural idea of a free people acting in a free market. I must do what I can do in order to achieve the largest profit for myself. Well, somehow, the corporations and the companies and the business owners have decided that this is not what they consider to be free enterprise. It's I say what's sauce for the goose is what's good for the gander. And if the corporations can do whatever they can to organize the government to stop the workers from organizing, then the workers can organize to get the government to stop the corporations from stopping them from organizing. It's as if some people have more rights than others. By the way, the right-wingies look at it. We don't like unions. It's socialism. No, it's not. Unions are not socialism. Unions are free market capitalism. It's a way for us to act to our own benefit in a way that we can organize together and gain a larger profits for ourselves. If you don't like, and of course there's a lot of complaints against unions, and they've made these complaints over the years, such as, a lot of the unions went to the mob to get their strong arm techniques rather than standing up to the companies themselves. They got these shady characters to go in and bust a couple of legs and everything, and that way they didn't have to do it themselves. Well, there might have been some truth to that. What was another thing? Oh, it prices the local, northeastern Rust Belt companies out of the business, because what they do is other countries that don't have unions can buy cheap labor and underprice us all the way down the line. Well, that's the way business goes. Eventually all businesses are destined to be outcompeted. as they start out and they have a open market where nobody else is competing against them. They can make all kinds of profits. As they're making all kinds of profits, other interests will come in and try to compete against them, and the price of everything has to come down as a result. So that's how it works. And the same thing with unions. I mean, the unions went in, they organized, they demanded higher wages. Now let me point out, there's many factors at work here, not just unions and management and all that. But after World War II is a good example. The United States of America had won World War II, and they were pretty much still intact. They were one of the only countries in the world that still had everything standing and intact, and so we were able to hit the ground running after World War II, and all these companies started building televisions and cars and hula hoops and whatever they built after World War II, and sold them to the American market, mostly to the American market, because it was the only thing that wasn't totally in disarray, and it was all self-contained within the United States pretty much. And at that very time, it was right after they passed a series of pro-labor laws during the Roosevelt administration. The unions were very powerful. From the 50s to the 60s into the 70s, they were very powerful, the unions. So what they were able to do is maintain a higher and higher standard of living for their workers. And the companies didn't like it, but they were making money too. Everybody was making money. It was during the after World War II until about 1980 or so, there was great prosperity in the United States. I mean, you can argue that if you like, but it was a golden age. And during that time, the unions had a lot of control, and everybody made a lot of money, so they were able to buy a lot of products, which meant that the companies were able to make a lot more money, and eventually, they fought. They passed that, all those anti-tax laws eventually, and they were able to eventually destroy the unions through propaganda. Yeah, and now we've seen also, but that's not the only thing that happened. The rest of the world started to recover after World War II. Japan, Germany, and eventually China, and even India now, and Latin America. They're kind of getting their feet underneath them now. So they are competing in the worldwide scale, and we as laborers in the United States are competing against foreign labor. And there's a lot. You say, oh, we don't like the trade deals or whatever. We don't like the way that China devalues their money or whatever. But it's a different world for many reasons. One thing I want to point out, though, is that China, which still calls itself a communist country, they don't allow unions there, because we think of unions as a socialist thing. Do they have unions in China? I mean, they might have some kind of workers group, but I don't think they're allowed to go on strike in China. This whole movement against the unions has been, of course, an anti-liberal movement. They don't want people to have rights, and of course, in places where they don't have rights, they don't have unions. Funny how that works. Now, what we're getting in the United States here is a continued effort to destroy the union movement. And I believe that, I can't tell the future. What is the future going to be? What is the future of the economic world? We have all these economists that act like they know everything, but none of them really can tell the future. It's very possible that the union movement is almost coming to an end. It may be that there will be no more unions in a few years. And so to say that they're obsolete maybe isn't not exactly right. Maybe they're defeated might be a better way of looking at it.